I want to begin with a strange one. Strange in the sense of it not being an immediately obvious question for me to ask you. The simple story, as you've just heard in Thomas's news bulletin, is that Thames Water has been fined £122.7 million for breaching of rules. It is the biggest ever penalty issued by the water regulator, Ofwat. They say that the fines follow its biggest and most complex investigation. And they insist, although how they prove or ensure this, I don't know, that the fines will be paid by the company and its investors, not by, if you happen to be listening even in the Thames Water area, not by you and me, not by its customers. 104.5 million for breaches of rules connected to its sewage operations, and just shy of 20 million for breaches relating to shareholder payouts. In other words, dividends. Do you do this? I read something the other day and I can't remember where. The worst thing you can do, I've said this to you before, is have the radio as your alarm in the morning, particularly if it's not a work day and you're sort of zoning in and out of sleep. You're semi-awake. And you hear something, and then a week later you're talking to your producer about topics, and you've just got this very vague, amorphous notion of a story that you think you might have heard. Turns out you dreamt the whole thing. You imagined the whole thing. But I read something the other day, or heard something the other day, that I kind of couldn't quite believe. And I do this for a living, as you know. It's my job to be across some, at least, of the detail. I don't think anyone's ever going to be across all of it. And it was the tale of a company that bought Thames Water about 20 years ago. And during their period of ownership, you might want to sit down for this. Do you ever feel obscenely naive? I'm tempted to ask you, in fact, I probably will ask you in the next 10 minutes, whether or not this kind of scandal, whether or not what has happened to our water companies is a feature or a glitch. But do you ever feel scandalously naive? You just think, of course. I do it a bit with the PPE. There's more news in that realm at the moment as well. Some extraordinary revelations coming out about companies that were stuck on the VIP lane and gifted incredibly lucrative contracts without having any interest or backstory or history in that sector at all. Their only qualification for these incredibly plum contracts was knowledge of or acquaintance with senior Tory politicians. In fact, that should be on my to-do list. We should have a little dig into that on today's show, because some of the stuff that's coming out is unbelievable. There's a television programme on tonight about one of the key exemplars of that scandal, Michelle Mone, who I think is still technically a baroness. Someone should make a list of all the people stuck in the House of Lords by the Tories in recent years who've turned out to be either receiving rewards for epic wrongness or, technically, I suppose, epic wrong-uns. But I digress, because this is the story, and I checked it this morning, and it turns out that I didn't dream it. So there is an investment bank that bought a water company. Right, there you go. There it is. My alarm's gone off. Was it yours? An investment bank bought a water company. Why would an investment bank want to buy a water company? Because they're dedicated to the safe delivery of clean, fresh water to the people of these islands? Or is it just because they have profound environmental concerns and believe that protecting the safety of our watercourses and the treatment of our sewage is a bigger priority than anything else that we're currently... Who would you want to own a water company? Anyway, it's an investment bank. 16 million customers in London and the southeast of England. So I don't know how naive you think this makes me sound. So they bought it in 2006 when its debts stood at £3.4 billion, right? £3.4 billion. It's quite a lot of debt, but I guess that's how business works. £3.4 billion. They sold it in 2017 and debt stood at £10.8 billion. Okay? So the debt has gone up from 3.4 billion to 10.8 billion. And then you get the news, if it counts as news, that the investment bank, which is called Macquarie, and other investors received dividends worth, how much do you reckon? £2.8 billion. Now, I am not thick. I have many, many failings, many flaws. but I'm not thick. If I stare at something for long enough, I can generally get my head around it. I'm not brilliant with numbers, but this isn't a mathematical conundrum. This isn't a numerical riddle. I'm not brilliant with numbers necessarily. Well, that again, I'm better with words than I am with numbers, but I'm still pretty good. Generally speaking, in the great scheme of things, I'd be in the upper percentiles when it comes, because I had a very good education. I'm not claiming any special gifts. I had a very good education, a lot of it very expensive, and the final bit at the London School of Economics. So I'm blessed. Educational privilege, if that's a thing. Of course it's a thing. It's why Donald Trump is trying to shut down universities or keep foreign students out of the country entirely if they hold opinions he doesn't like. Do you remember when anti-woke people couldn't tell you what woke meant? But the idea, of course, of being banned from going to university because of your opinions would perhaps have been on their list. They just couldn't come up with many examples of it actually happening. And now their hero is making it government policy. We'll be talking about that with Simon Marks at 11:45 today. So I am not thick. I'm going to keep saying that until you believe it. I am not thick. I am not thick. And I'm not hugely naive. I've been doing this job now for over 20 years. We have covered everything from the MP's expenses scandal right through to the PPE VIP lanes, the catastrophe of COVID, the epic con of Brexit. You know, I think you'd agree that together, when we put our heads together, we're pretty good, aren't we? We're pretty good at ironing out the wrinkles, at working out what's true and what isn't. We've been fairly good chroniclers of fake news and misinformation, calling out reality, even as more and more people seem dedicated to the opposite. So we're not thick, and we're not ill-informed. We're not slow on the uptake, and we're not unduly naive. We understand how the world works. And yet there's something about this story that just leaves me absolutely dumbstruck. If I bought something that had a lot of debt and I ran it, in inverted commas, for a decade, let's say, and then I sold it with a lot more debt, and somehow found, oops, a daisy, look what I've got in my pocket, billions of pounds. So the debt, I mean, I don't need to explain the numbers to you again. I just want you to explain the story to me, to anybody. Imagine that you were in a coma. This is a device we used to use quite a lot on the programme, and it's a good device, actually. We should probably use it again. Well, we're about to. Imagine you were in a coma in 2006 when this company bought Thames Water. They don't own it anymore. They sold it in 2017. I mean, all sorts of debt packages going on. You fell asleep in 2006 when this company had debts of 3.4 billion. You woke up in 2017 when it had debts of 10.8 billion. And you found out that the people who'd owned it in the interim walked away with just shy of £3 billion. And this is a water company. This is a monopoly. This is a company that exists solely to ensure that our sewage gets treated and our taps work. Maybe there's a couple of other things on the list as well, but those are your central. You're running a water company. Those are your central things. But they don't, do they? They seem to exist, and this is where I wonder that I might be terminally naive. They seem to exist exclusively to enrich people lucky enough to have bought into a company that has absolutely zero risk and no competitors. So am I going mad, or is this something that we should actually be taking to the streets about, something that's actually happened, something that actually exists? And how are we going to do it as a phone-in? Guys, your turn. I do it every day. I come up with the questions every day. How would you do this one? 84850. Drop me a quick text. If it's any good, I'll do it. Be my starter at 10. 0345 6060 973 on the old WhatsApp. I can't sit here waiting for you to get your finger out and finally do some work instead of leaving me to do the heavy lifting every morning. But in the absence of any effort from you, what happened to our water companies? At risk of sounding a little bit like Michael Gove, I don't generally like armchair experts. But actually, in this field, in this area, I think any understanding, if you've worked in the industry 0345 6060 If you've just riddled, if you've gnawed at this bone, if you've worried at this problem for longer than I have, 0345 6060 How does this happen? Because you can sit here now in 2025 and you insert your own words here. You can be scunnered, you can be gobsmacked, you can be absolutely incredulous about the actual unfolding reality. Labour were in power in 2006, so a couple of texts coming in are already unhelpful because it is not the case that this is a direct consequence of Tory shenanigans. Long before that, I see what you mean. The Tories actually privatised the water companies. Yes, but Labour, until relatively recently, haven't done anything to try to reverse it. I want you to do something that I suspect you'll find very easy. I want you to imagine that I am stupid. Okay? I want you to imagine that I am very stupid. Not unpleasantly stupid, not mean and nasty stupid, but just a little bit slow, a little bit Benny from Crossroads, a little bit slow on the uptake. And I want you to explain to me how this happened, not just to this water company, but essentially to all of them. How have we sat here in this country, in my case for the best part of 50 years, how have we sat here and watched individuals and institutions line their pockets on an industrial scale while presiding over epic mismanagement of national essentials, of essential utilities? It's my job really sometimes to convey to you the scale of a scandal that for some reason hasn't quite... It's as if, those things in the fairground where you take the big hammer and you smack the thing at the bottom and the little weight goes flying up the thing and hits the bell at the ding-ding at the top and then you win a prize. I sometimes feel that on some subjects I am smashing that hammer as hard as I humanly can into the base of the machine and it's only going up about 1.5 inches. I go whack, boo, whack, 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 boo. When really it should be going, I should just have to drop the hammer quite lightly and it goes ding, 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 ding. The whole nation should be up in uproar about this. Water, for God's sake. It's water. It's not widgets. It's not computer programs or something. It's not AI or something that you need or you don't need. Absolutely extraordinary to think that we've all sat here for decades while individuals and institutions, since let's say the 1980s, have waltzed in to... I need bigger words. Do you know what I mean? I need bigger words. I say, institutions, utilities, individuals. I need bigger words. How do you describe something as absolutely intrinsic and essential as water? What else is there? Air? They'd privatise that if they could, wouldn't they? They would. I'm not even joking. If Margaret Thatcher could have privatised air, she flipping would have done. And some massive investment bank would have come in, run the air supply into our lungs, taken over a company with no debt at all, sold the company with £10 billion of debt and mysteriously ended up with £3 billion in their back pocket. I'm not even exaggerating. So there are two things going on here. There are two mysteries. And the second one might turn out to be more interesting than the first one. I mean, certainly the second one is a question at which we can all have a crack. We can all have a go at answering the second one. Why do we let them get away with it? Or how do they get away with it? So how did it happen? 0345 6060 Come on. I mean it. Just give me your best thoughts, your best ideas, your insights. How did it happen? Technically, materially, substantively, how did it happen that something as intrinsic to our very existence as water can be treated as a cash cow to be mercilessly milked by people whose names we don't even know, but who have enriched themselves on a scale that even Croesus would envy? 0345 6060 But the second question is, how did we let them? I use the we very loosely. What does we mean? In the context of sewage, there's not much mystery about that. But in the context of the question that I'm asking you, the media, is it our fault? Is it my fault? The political establishment, did they want this to happen? When they started talking about privatising water companies, did this actually become intended? Is this what they wanted? Extraordinary to reflect that we've all sat here getting angry about all sorts of things, everything from, I don't know, immigration to low traffic neighbourhoods. I've got a missed information for you on that subject a little later in the programme. All being very carefully encouraged by all the usual outlets to get angry about this, angry about that. Why did no one ever, apart from Fergal flipping Sharkey, who I love, apart from Fergal, who has been telling, why have we been essentially impotent, silent, useless in the resistance of this epic scandal? How would you describe it? Fundamental's a good word, thank you. Yes, something as fundamental, that's from Aaron, as fundamental to our existence can get turned into a cash cow by cronies and investment bankers. So, 2 questions, essentially. How did it happen? Technically, how did it actually work without anyone getting thrown in jail? 0345 6060 973. And then the second question, which has only emerged in the course of these pontifications, but in terms of the alarms not going off, us not really noticing, whose fault is it that you and I didn't realise this was happening when it was actually happening?